Hello, and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, divorce support for dads, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude Sandoval, and I'm your host. I created this podcast in the Divorced Advocate community as a result of my own high conflict divorce, and because you as a dad deserve all the resources necessary to thrive through this challenging time. I encourage you to check out our website at thedivorcedadvocate.com, where there are resources that correspond to this episode, as well as free access to our membership community, where you will find live meetings, free workshops and courses, private discussion groups, and more. And now, on to this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week. And if you've been tuning in over the past several weeks, you know that we've just finished up the series around really kind of practical advice and how you can start this new year off during this chaotic time and doing some specific things that are going to help you through the process. Today, we're gonna shift gears a little bit and really, my guest today is going to be able to share some good news, I feel, around what he has done through and after his divorce. You know, we always hear we always hear just in general during divorce platitudes like you're just going to have to co-parent or you just put the kids first, et cetera, et cetera. But those of us who are or have been in high conflict situations know that those platitudes really fall short in a system that is broken and when we're dealing with a party that just isn't playing by the rules. And so my guest today, he's a strategist, he's an author, and he is a self-described survivor of the family court system. But he's also an unapologetic voice behind a book that he wrote called The High Conflict Playbook, a guide for parents fighting to protect their kids and maintain 50-50 custody when divorce turns ugly. Moving beyond just dry legal theory, he relies on lived experience to help parents navigate legal gaslighting and high-stakes conflict. He teaches parents how to treat their case like a war room, combining raw honesty with tactical precision. Through his writing and community, he equips parents with the tools to stop just surviving the system and start leading their families through it. Help me welcome Alex R. Dane. How you doing, Alex?
Doing good. Thanks so much, dude, for the introduction there. And I think as it'll come up when we're talking, you were there at the beginning of this journey as well. We had a conversation.
Yeah, man. So let's give everybody a little bit of background on kind of your situation. So we met and had a call and talked a little bit about your situation really early when you were in it. Give us a little bit of background on yourself, but also your journey through the divorce, and then let's jump into the book, because man, this book is amazing, and it is something that I'm going to say right now, and we'll talk about how people can get their hands on it. I think that anybody going through divorce, particularly a high conflict divorce, needs to get their hands on and read through.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. That means quite a bit. I mean, it's all connected. The reason I was contacting you at the beginning was because I found my place at the beginning of a divorce where I'd been a bit naive before. I won't go too much into the relationship, but it's the place to say that the high conflict was before the divorce as well. And I had decided that it was time to exit, kind of seeing that at this point, you know, we had a child and that it wouldn't be good for them to kind of see what was going on. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull this Band-Aid off. I'd spoken to a couple of lawyers, had done kind of a plan around it. And I knew that there was going to be some chaos off the start, but I drastically underestimated how the next steps were going to go for a few reasons. Number one, didn't understand the system. Number two, my brain is just wired to expect the best from people, which is A, kind of how you get trapped in that situation. But B is something that you need to switch if you end up in a high conflict kind of legal battle. And I'll do the caveats off the start. If you have conscious uncoupling and a collaborative divorce process, which 80% of them are, as far as I know.
Right.
That's great for you. Go that process, do mediation, and I hope it all works out for
Yeah.
you. That's best for families and children. But that's not what this book's about, because that's not the situation I found myself in. And
Right.
the first naivety was I didn't understand that the system would so quickly, when there was no allegations, nothing that I had done wrong, that I could be restricted from access to my child anyways, off the start. Because I went from, it was the middle of COVID, from spending every moment that I wasn't at work, and I didn't work a lot. Like, I worked 35 hours. I'm kind of a government person at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, a 35-hour a week job, and was home every day, and it was just time with my son and our little family there, because he had to cohort. It was where we were living, and went from that to having zero access for a number of weeks. And then, I think her lawyer at that time talked some sense into her, but it was about 4 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours. And they're trying to supervise, none of which made any sense. And the effect that had on me at this time, which I suspect a lot of your readers will understand, was that it was a visceral, psychological, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual effect on myself that put me in this position when I had to make the biggest decisions of my life, of my child's life, and my family's life, at a point when I wasn't able to think. There was so much fog. There was so many wild emotions that were clouding everything that I was thinking about. And so I started to reach out in different ways that I knew. So I was looking for books. I was Googling, like, what do I do in this? I was talking to family, trying to find other people that had been through it. And I think that's where I found, our conversation off the start, just trying to get some clarity. And even at that point, my brain couldn't take in much, because I know that we had a half hour to an hour long conversation, but it held on to one piece, which was, you told me you need to be strategic. Yeah. And I took that very literally, I think, because of my career in that, and started developing a strategy similar to a business strategy to kind of make my way through it.
Right. So you open the book specifically with the disclaimer that you mentioned early, which is that the book is not for people that are going through this. They're collaborating, they're compromising. This is for people that are experiencing something that's high conflict, which typically involves the other party having some mental emotional issues where they're doing things like you described, which is restricting access to the kids, maybe false allegations, maybe all of those things. That there is a playbook around this with individuals that exhibit some of these mental emotional issues that we talk about in the community all the time. You and I talked about up front when we talked initially, and you do have to be strategic, otherwise it can go very, very sideways right away. You talk about and you talk about that being naive. So if you will, can you maybe dive a little deeper into maybe what were your expectations going in that naivety, and what was the real specific wake up call that made you realize, oh shoot, like I need to, I really need to pay attention to this, and I need to shift my mindset around this.
Yeah, for sure. So I knew that there was, like I said before, that there was going to be some chaos off the start. I thought that she would be mad for a couple weeks to a month, that we would still kind of just go straight into 50-50. That would happen. And then there'd be some sort of mediation process with either a mediator or a lawyer. We would come together and talk things through after that month. And then, come to some sort of agreement and go through this process. And so after I'd sent, because I'd written an email just to kind of say, like, this is the direction that we're going to be going. And after I'd sent that, and my last bit of naivety was around, I was waiting. I wasn't going to file yet because I didn't want to instigate it higher. And at the same time was when that access was restricted for me. And then my first time seeing my son again in a couple of weeks, they would only let me do it with supervised and with no rationale for it, and there never was an accusation. There's some reasons around that. You can ask me that a little later, because there is something I did strategically to avoid, because I suspect there would have been accusations if I hadn't done something that you can ask me later about.
Okay. Can I ask you what the restrictions and why there were restrictions, and was that the wake up call when the restrictions came, and you kind of alluded to the fact that all of a sudden now you're not seeing your son? So
technically, I could have stormed in the house, grabbed my son, and left with him. And they couldn't have done much in the moment. But in speaking with my lawyer, if I did anything like that, it would make myself look unstable. And it would cause troubles later on when we were within court in order to work out that 50-50 agreement. And so I was advised very strongly that we needed to get into court quick, get a temporary agreement, and then work towards getting that there, because of the fact that she had filed in another province. I had to move there quick and to kind of follow, because the legal battle was going to take there. And then the place of residence, I no longer had one for a bit. And so those things were kind of written into the affidavit in a way that, like, I'm a professional. I own property, and I had all these things. But the way it was written made it look like I was a bit more unstable, not emotionally, but I guess financially at that time. And which was kind of untrue in the moment.
It was a false narrative that was being described, and it was in the court system. Yeah. And the reason, Alex, I ask is because in these high conflict cases, oftentimes like I said, there is a playbook around this that you know about. Sometimes it's a false allegation. In this case, it was moving, filing, and then creating this narrative about who you were, which then allowed her to restrict access, to your son. And that is kind of the crux of what starts to happen. And I want to raise awareness to those that are listening, is if your soon-to-be ex is not facilitating a relationship with your child, that is a red flag for you to pay attention to, right? Like, so you just described kind of this wake-up call was that, okay, she moved, she filed, and then within this filing is a bunch of false narratives about you, and then restriction of access to your son, which then creates a big problem, because now you're in a system where, okay, this is when we'll get into, you say one of your hardest lessons was learning the family court, and that your history as a parent is not necessarily going to translate into court and what it looks like on paper. So talk to this about how you then, so this is your wake up call, right? How, then, what was that realization? And then when you first read those affidavits and it didn't match reality, like what was your thought process then? And then what did you do from there?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, fellas. If you're stuck in the messy, uncertain middle of divorce, you don't just need hope. You need a plan. That's why I just did something huge. I've dropped the price of the Divorced Advocates lifetime membership to only $750. But here's the real game changer. It now includes 4 free one-on-one coaching sessions with me. We'll build your roadmap, strategize your next move, and get you clear on your future. Plus, you get 25% off coaching forever. So stop guessing and start thriving. Check it out and join at thedivorcedadvocate.com under the membership tab.
Yeah. So, and I can tell you're in this world because you're really catching on to everything.
Yeah, I live this world, my friend.
It's nice to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Not everyone knows that this level of detail of kind of what's happening with these situations.
Well, and that's why it's really important, because you didn't realize it. I didn't realize it when I was going through it. We have thousands of dads that are listening that are either going through this or have gone through this, or like, holy shit, yes, this is exactly. And there is a playbook to this when people are doing this, and you have lived it. You, without any very little guidance, traversed this and have derived so many important things in this book about the system. And that's why I want us to really go slow through this and talk about this, because your outcome was a positive, and now you're sharing what your outcome was with that. So if you can share, if you can share a little bit about that.
I just want to put two caveats before we go. So I do think the system is biased towards our specific gender a bit more than other ones. I do think this applies kind of on both sides as well.
Sure.
Because there's definitely can be, chaotic people, high conflict people on both sides. So I think it's a trap to get too caught in that piece sometimes, not necessarily at the beginning, but after, when stuff kind of settles out again. Not that I don't think it ever fully settles out. But so what happened next was, so I had started the divorce. She filed first, as you're saying, and she had moved provinces quite far. Luckily, it was kind of where I was from, and so it wasn't a huge deal for me to kind of move back there, but it did cost me my career and kind of career advancement at that point, and had to kind of restart that stuff. Not that that's as important as kind of custody and that, but it's just another thing. And when she served me, one piece that was kind of starting to happen was they used that first meeting back with my son, and I ended up being served there, which I'm a very calm person, which served me quite well, because I could never know for sure, but I would suspect that that's a bit of a setup to try to instigate a reaction from me. And I didn't react at that point. I'm sure I went home. I have 4 sisters that were all about the same age and called them. They complained, which is a part of the book. Like, you got to build that network, whether it's family, friends, and you need different people in different parts of your network. But at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to be 100% strategic. And I started thinking about back to school, which is the prisoner's dilemma. I'll try to do a quick explanation of it, but it's I think it's the simplest form of game theory. But essentially, if the prisoner's dilemma is, I'm going to do a quick, and some people, if you're deep into this, will have kind of feedback around this, but just for the purpose of this podcast, I'm going to simplify it a bit. But if you have 2 people, one person can tell on the other person or tell the truth. The best outcome is a collaborative divorce, or both people tell, or both people kind of don't tell on each other. Sorry, I just messed up the explanation. If they're facing prison time, that's the best case outcome. So they collaborate, they don't get prison time. But in real world examples, at one time, just in one case of it, the outcome is usually that, or the best outcome is if you actually tell on someone else, because it ends up it's likely they're going to tell on you. And so you have to preemptively do it, which is kind of what their side did. But over time, the lesson of the prisoner's dilemma is if you do it for 1,000 times or 10,000 times, that's actually not the best strategy with it. And within society, with the prisoner's dilemma, typically how people who aren't antisocial or have kind of antisocial traits do it is we tend to collaborate and kind of move forward with it. But within my mind, I went back to that prisoner's dilemma, and I knew, okay, I can predict what she's going to do, because at each point, whatever I do, she's going to take the other side to make the process more difficult, or to cause, a negative reaction for myself or a negative outcome for myself, which is a bit of strategy that I used as I was going on, because I could predict what they were going to do, because it was either the opposite of what I was going to do or something that was going to prevent me from having access to my son.
Right. So what you're describing, to use your example there, is they have this script that they're going to follow, and so she's filing, she's saying things about you, and then essentially attempting to work backwards in getting you to react, to be able to justify or to support what it is that they're saying. It's a tactic that happens all the time. It's like poking the bear. You're going to poke the bear, you're going to poke the bear, you're going to poke the bear. And then you poke the bear so many times, the bear gets mad, and then they go back and they go, well, see, like, he's angry, or he's going to do something rash, like you said, go and run in and take your son and go. You had every right to do it, but then that looks bad, even though they're creating scenarios and setups for you. And the other thing I want to point out about this is, typically somebody who's going through this and doing this is thinking about this for an extended period of time, like way longer than you have. You're thinking, hey, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to compromise and get this done? They're thinking the opposite. They're thinking what their end goal is, how they're going to control it, and then working your prisoner's dilemma there. They're going to be the first movers. They're going to file. They're going to have a protection order, or they're going to move away and then take the kid. So I hear this a lot of times. You're fortunate to be able to move, to be able to have the ability to do that. This happens lots of times to guys where they can't go, they can't leave their career, they can't up and move. And then this creates another dilemma around what they're experiencing. And so when we talked about being strategic, you really have to be strategic when something like this starts to happen, and somebody like this with these issues going on starts to implement a plan that they've thought about for a very long time. Because you're right, it was no coincidence that they served you exactly at the same time that you were finally having some parenting time with your son. So this leads me into the next part, which is navigating the system, right? You have a chapter titled "Accept the Reality," where you argue the legal system is not designed for fairness, but rather for efficiency. Can you explain what you mean by that, and how a parent should shift their strategy once they accept that reality?
Yeah. So then the next step was, the affidavits start, like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So you get sent this document, or I did, and I read it, and some of it's quite dramatic. And I'm like, who are they talking about? Like, who?
Right.
Some of it's outright lies. Some of it is, mm-hmm. Twisting it in a very negative light.
Yeah.
And my initial reactions, you go through all the stages of grief off the start. You're kind of, what? Some denial, some definitely depression, loss of hope. I mean, if there's one thing I can impart to the listeners that are kind of at the beginning of it, and I'll just interlude to it here, is that feeling of hopelessness when it feels mm-hmm. like you're going to lose, you're not going to have your kids ever again, and all of that. There's times when it feels like walking away is the best way, and there's times when I just thought everything was done. And you're right, I am privileged in a number of ways to get through this situation, because it is pay to play, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about the war of attrition with money later. But just that there was times when it wasn't like I kind of felt hopeless, but I knew it would work out. It was times when it was hopeless, and around this time when I knew it wouldn't work out, and 100% believed that there was no way, but I was still going to walk forward through it. And for those, that's where you kind of really need to tap your networks. Really, there's kind of a male loneliness crisis right now, but mm-hmm. tap into family if you have it, friends, men's groups, crisis lines, whatever you need to kind of get through that part.
Yep.
So the affidavits, I'd have to go through all these emotions, and then after 24 hours, 48 hours, my brain would come back, and I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, none of this is time for me to respond yet. And then I would start writing the next kind of affidavit, because there's usually 2, sometimes 3 or 4 that you get before you go. And so then we had our temporary court, appearance to come up with a temporary parenting plan, the first part. And I noticed some things right away, which was that, the lawyers don't know each other, which I work in a system in my day job. And I kind of know that the professionals know each other and those relationships are important, even if they're on opposite sides.
Yep.
The judges don't seem to have deeply read affidavits. When you get in,
Yep.
I don't want to get in kind of legal trouble. I don't think I get in trouble for that. But there was a time when I was watching someone else's case, waiting for mine, where a judge actually admitted it. But a lot of times it's not like TV where they've deeply read into everything. I think they're reading it right before and skimming. So they matter to kind of get into the game, but I'm not sure how much, if it's a 16 or 100-page affidavit.
Yeah. It's not Law and Order where they're collaborating in the judges' chambers to really figure out what the best course is for Alex's family and Jude's family, because they have, they're dead set on making sure that there's justice served. It's not that's not the system. Yeah.
And each state is different for how the legal system works, but I think some of these are kind of global, at least for most of it.
Sure.
And they want families to work together. So they wanted us to kind of go through mediation at that place, but they'll put in a temporary order. But the other piece was, I started hearing in the best interest of the child. So I started trying to figure out what that was. And over, 2-3 years of that process, eventually I came to the realization that it means different things to different people within the system. That a lot of times it didn't quite mean in the best interest of the child, but from my perspective, a lot of times it was used as a vague wording to justify the system kind of reinforcing itself. And once that kind of clicked in my mind, I knew from my work that this, I do think people try the best that they're trying to do in the moment, but we have these big systems, and a lot of it's about efficiency. And so they wanted us parents to, in their minds, come up with a plan on our own. Obviously, that can't happen. Yeah. And then secondary to that, they want to get us through that whole process quick enough so they don't have to deal with us.
Right.
And so that's where I say that they want efficiency to get through that process. So they kicked us back out to mediation. And then because it was a month or 2 months where, my ex had defined what my relationship was with my child, whereas I went from every moment I wasn't at work spending with my child because she had restricted so much access, they start from a little bit more time than that. And then because it was COVID and all the systems were slowed down where it's at, and, mediation took about 9 months before we got into there. Wow. So I had 9 months where my parenting plan was mostly defined by my ex and then reinforced and a little bit improved by the judge. At this time, there's a few things that they put into the plan that opened it up. I can see in hindsight for 50-50. They suspected it was going to go that way because I think that the judge could kind of start to see what was going on here. But the system is slow. It's working for efficiency. And the other piece is, as we were talking about or alluding to, perception. So it's not this logical thing of law where they go through, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, where they go through and they're like legally looking logically, like how relevant is this evidence, like Law and Order, and gotcha moments, and your lawyers, and I want the truth, and all that.
Right.
It's the first 5 seconds that we're probably in there. They have a perception of how we're reacting, and that's where emotions, the same as when I got served, and it's a privilege that I can stay emotionally stable, because I suspect when I was 16 years old or 22 years old, I wouldn't have. But I'm 40, and so I'm just too tired to have much reaction. And then because I'd been in different situations where I can present well in court, which is also a privilege, some of those things started kind of turning it around into my favor, although there's still so much more the next 2 years.
Yeah, well, so you developed a strategic framework to navigate that court efficiency model, right? You call it rational, fair, and solid. Those three
Yeah.
things: rational, fair, and solid. Can you break down those three pillars for us?
Yeah, because I started thinking, who do they want to be a dad, right? And that's literally, I sat down and I'm like, if I'm a judge and I have to go by what these people look like, who do I want to be a dad, right?
Right.
And I know the bad case scenarios, like I never saw it, but I could suspect someone in court kind of banging their fist or yelling about their ex probably wasn't going to go over well.
Right.
I could see right away the trying to be right. And I was told that by my lawyer, but trying to be right doesn't matter as much as perception.
Exactly.
So being able to kind of let go of points and arguments very quickly and not worry about what the other side was doing as much as, basic marketing of myself. I have one degree more over in business, and I just started thinking kind of business like in marketing. And so the brand that I thought was, if I seem fair, I'm more likely to be trustworthy. And so I wasn't always, just slagging my ex. I was pointing out points that were kind of strategic that still wouldn't make me look bad, but where I'd made a mistake or something like that. I'd try to point that out because it gains trust in how I'm speaking, further. And then being really stable and seeming stable and not showing too much emotion one way or the other, but also not being completely void of emotions, because then trust kind of breaks down as well. So seeming like I was vulnerable in court. So when I was talking about my son and I was about to cry and how much I missed him, not completely holding that in either. It was okay to cry in court a little bit, but also not being, super blubbering or getting too angry, right? Because I think that having this, like, and it's tough. Like, it's really tough to kind of do all this. Like, you haven't slept the night before. You're talking about like very deep things, and you have to show only the right amount of emotion, but also holding in, and I'll wrap this up quick. Also holding in that all the societal frameworks and stereotypes of whatever gender you are. So for me, being a dad, being a male, that I have to take those into account because everyone was seeing me through that lens within the court system. Right. And then making sure that at times when it kind of didn't play towards the way that would be helpful for me, that I was kind of risk mitigating that brand wise. And then at times when it did play, just let it ride and take the privileges that you have.
So the rational, fair, solid was your framework for creating the narrative of actually who you are and the dad that you actually are. So all of what you did, all of how you showed up, all of your interactions, all of your communications were all built around, am I a rational person? Am I demonstrating that I'm a rational person? Am I demonstrating that I'm a fair person? Am I demonstrating that I'm a solid person, a solid dad that's showing up, which is really, really important, because what's happened is the other side is trying to create an opposite narrative, right? They've done a false allegation. They've, like you said, with the affidavits, you're reading these and you're going, who are they talking about? Just a month ago, we were the happy family, and she was sending me off with my son to the park, and and now all of a sudden I'm abusive and I'm controlling, and like whatever the narrative is, or there's even a protection order that says he does this or he does that, right? That a lot of the time gets completely just defended in court and then goes away, except for the fact that the court is based upon perception, right, and a preponderance of evidence. It's not, they don't have to have a clear and convincing evidence. They have to create this narrative like you talked about. So that's one of the strategies, right? So they'll do that and they'll bring that up in court and et cetera. And you're going like, what the hell? Like you're all, and then you're automatically on defense. But if you come to the reality that like you said, which is, okay, I understand the strategy. Like when you understand the system and you understand their strategy, then you finally get to the point where you're like, the rules of the game, right? So now you can be engaged and then be engaged by being rational, fair, and solid. And then the next thing you talk about in the book is that a lot of what happens through this process relies on communication, right? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned using tools like even AI to keep the communication brief, informative, friendly, and firm, right? We talked about, I've done podcasts on that. We talk about it. So tell us why the tone of emails in that vein, in the BIF vein, is so critical.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we have to credit Bill Eddy for all of that, but there's no better way that I've found. So just to back up one piece, they couldn't make the really deep allegations against me because prior to it, I actually had a recording where you only need one party consent to record. And I'd had a recording that never kind of came out through the process where she had been, I'm trying not to go into the relationship as much, but it was a number of months back in the relationship. And typically the arguments were where I would just kind of be calm, but something would trigger it. And then they'd go on from one side, from her side for hours and hours sometimes. And there was a point during one of it, because I had to kind of make myself remember what was going on, because my brain is too easy, too quick to forgive. And I kept going back in that cycle over and over again. So I was recording it one time, and she said that if I ever left, and I was first mover, I did leave. I just didn't file first. I said we're divorcing. But if I ever left, that she would make some, and I won't say what they were here, but she would make some very dramatic accusations about things that did not happen. So in the affidavit, there were other accusations, but some of the more serious ones that I think would have occurred, I avoided because they knew that I had that recording, and although and it wouldn't come out in court unless they brought up something. But just to kind of put that out there for people.
Well, and I want to add to that oftentimes these allegations are false, and they they are false, and then they do get refuted. But the problem is you start behind the eight ball, right? So then you're dealing with criminal issues on top of family court issues, on top of maybe somebody that's moved. Like, it becomes this whole mountain that you've got to climb. And so you are really smart, and it's unfortunate that you have to do something like record somebody when they start. But when they start with this language, you've got to pay attention. You've got to protect yourself, but you also got to protect your kiddos, because in what we're going to talk about here coming up is how to protect your kiddo through this, because this is having an impact on them as well. So I just wanted to point that out. But if you could talk then about the tone of the emails and why it's critical in that framework of rational, fair, and solid, and how that can show up.
Yeah. And it's all tied to the same thing. So how they did kind of allegations, which will tie into the emails here, was they tried to paint a picture where saying I was angry, which is almost the exact opposite of my personality. And so some of it was subtle, and some of it they're directly saying, this type of thing, and trying to paint like an angry man, which if you think about stereotypes, that's more stereotypical for like what would work kind of with the genders. And then forgetful, which, I mean, I'm pretty on the ball most of the time. I'm sure I do forget my keys from time to time, but they would tie that in, which is another stereotype. Watch all the sitcoms. What's a dad look like on the sitcoms, right? And it's almost like they're trying to paint that exact picture.
It's a narrative, a bumbling,
and those sort of things. And then there were some more specific ones. I don't even remember them now. And so while that's going on, it's coming out in the affidavits, and it's coming out in emails. And so off the start, you get one of these emails where we're trying to communicate, and my initial reaction, which I'm sure is a lot of other people, is to write this huge thing refuting each piece logically.
Right.
Convincing the other side.
Justice.
And my brain's confused. There's so many emotions going on in there that it's like this, pages and pages of gibberish email that is just not effective. Okay. And so I was recommended early to read Bill Eddy's work on BIF statements. But then the problem with BIF statements is when I didn't have a lot of brain power, and even if it's 24 hours later and I'm quite emotional and I haven't practiced them, that it's hard to know exactly how to write it still. it's so hard not to make that one point, and I feel for all you guys out there in this right now. With me, it's more around co-parenting, and it's drifted off a bit, at least for now. But not making that one point and understanding how to use that language is difficult. And so what I found was, AI was just at the point where it could start writing those. And so I'd wait the 24 hours. My brain would be back to where I could kind of think. And then I'd throw it through. I'd either do my version up first and then throw it through ChatGPT or Claude, and see what it comes out with. Or I would ask it, can you analyze this as a BIF statement by Bill Eddy? And it comes back. And I'm telling you, I don't know how it works, but it diffuses the situations. And although it's not as satisfying sometimes as a self-righteous email defending myself, the outcome, which, I much prefer good outcomes. The outcome is a lot better in the end.
Right. Well, that's exactly, if you can make that mindset shift, that it's not about justice. It's not going to be about you proving your point or proving right or wrong, but it's going to be proving that you're a good dad, like your 3 pillars, like that you're consistent, that you're there, that you're fair, like all the things that you described, then it makes it easier to understand if you work back from the outcome, that you want the outcome to be that you're going to be spending time with your kiddo, which is, it's crap in off the bat that you should have to be doing this, but you have to make this mindset shift. And then that makes it easier. And you're absolutely right. Like back in the day when I was going through mine, we didn't have these AI tools. The AI tools are phenomenal right now to do exactly what you described, which is, hey, write it out and then take it in AI, say, can you adapt this to be brief, informative, friendly, and firm, and then it'll give you something that will be much, much better. And then again, then you're able to create and sustain the narrative that is you, that is fairly you, right? When you're going through this process, let's shift. You just mentioned, right, a little bit about that internal battle. Like it's going to make you feel better if you're going to prove your point, right? But it's not going to work. So you write about what you call brain fog during this process, and particularly you mentioned it in the Oprah when you're needing to make these really important, literally life-altering decisions. You have this brain fog, and then you also say that during this time your mind and your emotions will lie to you. What did that look like? Describe that to us. Is what that looked like for you? Because I know a lot of guys are experiencing it, but I know I felt like I was freaking crazy, right? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think through life through a spiritual lens, and the deepest spiritual lesson around the purpose of emotions that I've ever had in my life was through this process. And so initially, when your family's, your child's ripped away from you, essentially. And I have a very visceral reaction to that, even now with transition, where each transition still today, there's an hour where I just have to sit down and not do anything. And then 5 hours where I have to kind of move quite slow, because although stuff's very stable right now, just having, my child out of my life again, it takes me a while to kind of reset. And now imagine that times 100, where I don't know if they're coming back. Not I don't know. I think that they're going to be successful during this process. And so all these emotions that we're told all our life we're not supposed to have, right? You're not supposed to be too depressed. You're not supposed to be too angry. You're not supposed to be too anxious, right? Look at all the news. Look at everything. These emotions we're not supposed to have.
Right.
Through the process of going through, separation, divorce, and all that, I finally understand what those emotions are for. And there was a point in the hopelessness, before mediation or just after it, when, I still wasn't back up to anywhere close to 50-50, where everything every fiber of me was, either sad or angry and is deeply hopeless, that I just realized it didn't matter anymore. I was still going to move forward. And I saw a core of strength because I knew that no matter what happened, I was going to fight for my family, for my son.
Yeah.
And that strength then grew out to be so big that, one of my books that I loved growing up was The Stranger, but another Camus quote, which I put
Albert Camus
book, and I'm going to say it wrong, but that in my deepest winter, I knew that I had an infinite summer.
Yep.
I finally understood that. And when that moment happened, then I could start to notice some other things. Okay. So if I have a full day in court, the night before, I know I'm not going to sleep. I knew that from running races before, that I could still perform if I didn't sleep. And then when I got into court and I was all anxious, and then the depression would come on, or sadness, maybe not, depression's probably too far for that. Sadness would come on. I noticed that it took away the anxiety and I could be sad. And I noticed that anger, if I didn't keep it, if I didn't acknowledge it or push it away, in public it never happened, but that it could turn into rage. But if I acknowledged it, became friends with the anger, it's the most motivating force in the world. I mean, revolution throughout history, revolution after revolution. What is the feeling that causes that revolution on a global scale? It's anger. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so anger is the fuel and the energy to move everything forward through this process. You need it. You need to make friends with it. You can't be raging in court. You can't be raging against your ex, but you need it to get through it. You need your sadness because it keeps you vulnerable, which people will trust you more if you can stay good with that. But as well, it's going to reduce the anxiety. You need the anxiety because it's going to keep you sharp when you're writing your affidavits and make sure that you don't miss anything. Right. It's going to be like the sharpening of your blade to keep you focused while you go through this whole process. Right. And to have such a deep internal realization of how all those work now, as you get to the end of the book, I talk about it, but when the legal stuff kind of dies off some, the amount of energy you have in the rest of your life and the amount of focus that gives you on parenting. Yeah. If you keep that separate from your parenting time, the amount of focus you have, you're just a better human being through this.
Yeah. You have built strength mentally and emotionally, just like you would physically, right? If you kept in the gym and working on this. And so what I take away from what you're saying is that you need to feel these emotions, guys. Like it's just going to bring up a ton of stuff, and the fog will begin to clear, as Alex says, when you identify, hey, I'm angry. Okay. And then you take that and you don't ignore it, right? You do something with it. These emotions are all meant for us to pay attention to something. But if you're at least like I was never taught to really understand what they are. I was just taught anger, like you said, anger, that's bad. You can't be angry. So just suppress that anger. And that's where it will just keep you in a fog, because if you're suppressing all of this, you're just in a fog of these emotions coming up and then finding ways in which you have to suppress them or ignore them. And that does not work, guys. So you've got to be aware of them. That's the first step. And then learning skills to allow them come up, and then learning what to do with them. Like Alex said, like anger is probably one of the best motivators that you can ever have in your life if you utilize it the correct way and harness that, I guess, is what you should say. So that's really important. I think that's a really important message, Alex, to get to the guys, because I know I just thought and I'll say the only way that I really came to that realization was what you said earlier, which was getting involved in community and talking to other guys about that. Because until I started that and started hearing other guys' stories or hearing other guys talk about it, I was like, I feel like I'm crazy. Like, you got this side coming at you and they're saying, and you start thinking, maybe it's true. Like, is this true? Like, you start questioning yourself, and it's complete crap. You're not. So that's why whatever the community, that's why we've built a divorce advocate community for group, like whatever you want, wherever you're at, but find somebody to talk to. Maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, whatever it is, so that you can get through that fog. So let's talk about the protecting our kiddos through this process and through all this legal noise. We hear, the kids are priority, right? And you talk about in the book creating a hard boundary or a bubble around your parenting time. So through all the brain fog, through all the false allegations, like all of that stuff, how did you manage to compartmentalize all of that stress so that it didn't bleed into time with your son?
Yeah. So you have to be very conscientious about that when you're in the middle of kind of all the legal proceedings, and make sure that we're clearing out a spot for that time. So, before transitions, visualizing how that transition is going to go and how to make sure, if your ex-partner is going to be a little bit wild during that transition, that, visualize not reacting for that, number one. 30 minutes to an hour before, if something heavy's happened, sit in your car, talk to someone else. If you need your cry. Like, I don't know where we talked about this, like, that guys don't cry. Guys cry. Even back in the day they did. And I think it's kind of a little bit of BS that when people said, like, we only cried during sporting events. No, like I grew up sports, guys, and all that. And I remember, like, lots of different times that weren't just related to sports around that. Yeah. And this is a time where 100% you need that cry, because that's what makes kind of anger come out sideways, is when you do suppress that anger, understanding where the anger is coming from and why, because anger is a secondary emotion, and spending some time with that. And, sometimes doing the opposite of the emotion helps too. So a lot of times people will say, well, if I'm angry, I'll go, hit a punching bag and that. And catharsis actually usually isn't the best. It kind of creates more of it because it reinforces neurological pathways. But sometimes doing the opposite beforehand. But taking that time with the emotions before the transition, because you're about to go into what could be a heated time, and you need to perform there because it could end up in court what happened. And by perform, I mean stay calm. And then B, you're about to have time with your kid, and you need to be able to completely separate in your mind what's going on outside, and then have those moments with them. Now, during my parenting time, if something came up and it was, my brain was turning too much, or I was getting too much, sometimes I'd have to take a break there too. And, either have someone that can kind of come, give you 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or, taking that time just to make sure that you're protecting kind of the emotional weight of the whole court process from not coming into the parenting time. And the more being gentle with yourself, it's not a perfect game, but kind of moving forward and figuring out how to do better next time. If you need to kind of take some more time, like if you're short a little bit with your kiddo, I think it's kind of quick to learn how to figure all that out.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that you really need to be conscientious with scheduling that time to get yourself prepared to do whatever it is, transition, parenting time, maybe replying to affidavits. You talk about, with that, your 24-hour rule, you wait 24 hours until you really start doing any responses so that you can experience the emotions or or take the time, like you said, to get yourself in a mindset so that you can be brief, informative, friendly, and firm, or that you can show up for your kiddos and be happy and engaged and present and all the things that you need to do, which is sometimes hard, and that really takes intention, guys, right, Alex? Because we're busy. Like we're working, we got to get the kids ready for school. We got to plan meals. We're dealing with it. Like, so you really need to be intentional, not only just about that, but like life in general, right? Be really intentional about taking that time and so the other, you talk about the fallacy about guys crying. The other fallacy is like taking care of ourselves is selfish. You need to be the foundation that's solid, like one of those pillars that Alex talks about. You need to be solid before you can show up for your kiddos. So doing something like Alex is talking about, which is, hey, a half hour before, you're maybe taking some time to do a meditation, go for a walk, journal, whatever system that you create that's going to allow you to get into that mindset for your kiddo is absolutely positively important. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, and working out and that sort of
working
stuff.
Out, right. Like we talk mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual here in the community. Those four things, you need to have those in a solid position, so that that's just your foundation from which you're working all the time, and then just build on it.
I mean, for me, my life ended up there's actually like a physical divide through it, because you have your time with your kid, you have your time not with your kid, and so during those years, my time not with my kid 100% was focused on the legal battle, even when it wasn't time, and the kind of stuff that was going on with that. And then my time with my son Arthur was 100% with him. Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about this. The final thing that I want to discuss, which is really sensitive and difficult through this, and that's the resources. You have a pretty blunt title in your book called "Become a Money Making Machine." Talk about the financial reality of litigation in a high conflict situation and why you advise swallowing your pride to get help.
Yeah. So, I mean, one more caveat. I'm privileged enough that I could start the fight. I'm not privileged enough that this was not a serious monetary and financial hit to get through it. I mean, I think it was about $100,000 after taxes. And I know there's people that have a lot more, people that have a lot less kind of through that process. And for me to eat that much was a lot, because that was almost.
I don't know. A lot of people have. I mean, there's not a ton of people have $100,000 just laying around. So I think that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty common. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah,
and so the benefit was that I did. As tragic as it sounds, was that I didn't have my son every day, and so the other thing that I was doing, other than preparing for legal stuff, was working. And I was lucky because the field I work in, I could work my frontline job as well as my kind of more managerial job. And so I had two jobs that I was working through. Even that wasn't enough. I kind of almost doubled the amount that I was making. And my apologies to everyone that can't do this. I really feel, because I can only imagine the frustration. I saw some other people that were kind of navigating, and I talked to some people that were navigating a different way that I'll talk about right away here. But really kind of pushing as hard as I could that way, but as well at a cost to my health. Like, there was a bit of a cost to my health during that process. And then as well, even that wasn't enough. And so I borrowed from family to kind of get through that, still paying that back at this time, and borrowed some loans that were pretty risky, just because basically like time crunched down to day by day at that. I wasn't focused on what was going to happen 5 years from now. If they're like this, you need to pay your retainer of $5,000, $10,000 now. Then I said, how do I do it to myself? And then figured it out and just did whatever it took to get through that. And I'm still paying back on some of those things, but for me, it has worked out. I know it doesn't work out for everyone through that process, but there is a war of attrition that's going to happen during this process. Yeah. And you need to kind of either pay to play, or you can self-represent. What I was surprised watching other people was that self-representation was actually, from what I saw, quite effective. I mean, I did things like write my own affidavits and tried to cut down on legal costs as much as I could. And I mean, one of the most naive things was I had no idea that every email costs money. And so I was sending sometimes 10 emails. And now,
right.
And then when that first bill came, when I had
15 minutes a pop,
and 2 lawyers between provinces, and well, you're getting a deal on emails. Mine were like 30 to 60, but yeah, and they had 2 lawyers between 2 provinces because we didn't know where it was going to occur yet. And then I got those first bills, and I'm looking like, what do you mean you're charging by the minute? What is?
Yeah.
So maybe I should put that in the book. Lawyers charge by the minute. Or by the 10 minutes.
Well, and a minimum of 15 minutes. So if they look at 2 minutes and they read your email and that's it, they charge 15 minutes. So the 10 a day at, they read 10 different ones. Like, it gets really, really expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm someone that I had 2 dogs that got old, and it was a long ago in a different relationship. And both the first one was passing away. I mean, the vet bills that it took me a while before I understood. I'm like, oh, he's not coming home. I have to stop paying these thousands, because to me, my brain, it's like, it gets very like logical with stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, do whatever it takes. You'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
But money wise, there's, and then when it's kind of fighting to be a parent, that's like a whole other level, where I would do whatever. And so some ways the system probably likes people like me because I'm going to pay whatever it takes and do whatever it takes. And the perfectionism of, well, if they don't have this piece of information, maybe, even though it's probably only 0.01% of what's going to have the effect of, winning the next court thing, but I'm going to make sure they have it, and so that cost, right. I probably paid more because of that, because of my perfectionism.
Right. So the unfortunate reality is, if you're in a high conflict situation, it's going to be expensive, because you're going to need to engage an attorney at some point, at some level in this. And if you do that, then you're going to have to figure out how to pay them. The thing I will say, guys, as men, we will always make more money. We can figure out a way to make more money and continue to make more money. There's very rarely a guy in our community I've talked to that has been down the road further after this and hasn't said, hey, my life is better. Yeah, it was a financial hit. We were just talking about it in our group meeting this morning. It was a financial hit. It was short term. And I came back from it bigger and better and stronger than I did before. And the challenge that I had in, like we talked about, building yourself mentally, emotionally stronger, translated into being able to make more money professionally in your business or your career or whatever it was. So for those of you stressed about that, and I know, like, it was a big stress for me, do what you've got to do. Alex, you talked about, taking on basically a second frontline job, right? To that, where you're literally you're working all the time. And when you're not working, you're working on your case. And then when you're not working on your case, you're parenting, right? Like, so it's a lot of work, but you got to do what you got to do. We had Anthony Thompson on the show a few weeks ago too. He's like, I drove Uber. I've done that. Like, to make ends meet, you do what you've got to do, because it is absolutely critical that you're showing up. And I would say, Alex, the court needs more dads like you that are going to fight for that, because the other unfortunate reality is it only takes one party to make it high conflict. And typically, and yes, this goes both ways for men and women, but if the one party is not going to collaborate and cooperate, then you're going to court, and that's going to be expensive. I do want to touch though on the part of swallowing your pride and asking for help. And that might be that you've got to drive Uber. That might be that you've got to ask a relative for a loan. That might be that you've got to do something as a dad to have to figure out how to make that money in order to go down this road and go to court. Just touch on that a little bit, because it's really, really hard.
Yeah. I mean, there's some difficult phone calls with that, difficult on my side, but to be able to kind of ask for those things, but it's just so worth it to be able to kind of go through it. And the ways that I swallowed my pride was the first job that I got when I came back, I burnt it to the ground because I was more focused on my case. And really, like, once I made that decision, I didn't think too much of it, and then jumped into another one that was, I was a bit strategic about it. It was kind of outside my normal area, but I feel guilty. I mean, I feel guilty about it because they definitely didn't get my best work. They probably got my worst work.
Yeah.
But I had to focus on this other stuff. Asking family for money and when you're in your 40s is a lot for me, but it's easily justifiable for my family that I have now. I really liked what you're saying about the jobs and that, because that was my experience too, is when you kind of get through everything, the amount of energy that's going into the court cases for myself, when that's all done, it really translates into the rest of your life. And we can't guarantee this for everyone, but for me as well, that was my experience, was the entrepreneurial, family wise. Shortly after, in most metrics, I'm in a much better space socioeconomically that I wasn't even trying to be, but post all the legal wrangling, that in a very surprising way. I had to, there's certain things I had to do, like I had to get a house close to hers, and they were kind of nicer neighborhoods. And so I had to figure out a way to kind of level up what I was making while the court was going on in order to, sell my other house and get enough money to get into this much more expensive house and then afford the lifestyle either. And I think that because of the crunch of everything, I took risks that worked out, and I was more focused that kind of got me through all that process.
Yeah. Well, and that's why when I'm talking to guys, I always say stay strong, right? Because you got to stay strong through it. But the other thing I say is you are strong enough, because when you're in it, you have no idea, right? Like you're in that fog, you're in that washing machine, you're in that chaos, but you are strong enough. So if you stay strong, you're going to come out like Alex, like myself, like all the guys that I talk to, stronger and better off. I know, and we talk about it, we call it Life 2.0. It's hard to see that while you're going through it, but you have your final chapter is from survival to superpower, right? So let's wrap up on share a little bit about a message of hope, where you're at now, and like what's that relationship like with your son now?
Yeah, so I mean, sons. So I have a son and a stepson, and then a daughter on the way next month. I'm in another relationship that's it's been a couple of years. It's coming on 2.5, 3. And
great.
It's just super balanced. Like the relationship is very kind of fair on both sides and supportive. And
nice.
I think we're past the honeymoon period, so I think it's gonna
and it's gonna last. Great.
Yeah, and that energy was very surprising. Kind of when that just translated into everything else in my life. And I think I find myself at the place where I have a good relationship with all my kids. If I think about my parenting compared to my parents were good parents, but compared to my parents' parenting and other people I know, like I wouldn't trade for how my relationship that I have with my kids and how I've showed up and how I participate with them. There's some silly things, like they wanted to take up skateboarding. So at 44, which is probably a bad decision. I built a mini ramp in the garage, and
oh boy,
and
Well, you're in the healthcare industry, so at least you have direct access to getting patched up quickly and hopefully effectively if something goes wrong there. But yeah, probably not one I'm going to do with my old body for sure. Yeah. Well, that's so that's great news, and that's what I would. You've got a new relationship. It's successful, a new family, another kid on the way. I mean, there is the opportunity for, again, stay strong, build, come through this, and you're going to be bigger, you're going to be better. You're a perfect example of that. And Alex, I sincerely appreciate that you took the time, because it's not quick to write a book and to share all of the information that you've shared through this process. And so I really appreciate that after all of this, that you've taken the time to share with everybody your experience and how to help them through this. The book is called High Conflict Playbook, a guide for parents fighting to protect their kids and maintain 50-50 custody when divorce turns ugly. Where can the listeners get this book, buy it, and get involved in? I know you've got a Substack and a community where you also share some insights as well. Where can they get in touch with you on that?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, and especially by the time this comes out, the paperback will be out, or the soft cover paperback will be out up there as well, because it's being finalized this weekend. But I think the podcast will be a few more days before it comes out. Check that on Amazon. The Substack, How to Win Your Divorce.substack.com, or look up Alex R. Dane. And those are kind of the different ways to connect. And you can email me too if you'd like, at alexardane@howtowinyourdivorce.com, or alex@howtowinyourdivorce.com. Sorry, I did go with the shorter name for that. And yeah, I'd love to hear. This is probably the best podcast for this information I've been on, because it's I'm a technical person. I feel like we got really technical with all the details of how this will go. And just to everyone out there, just keep walking through it. It will feel like there's no hope, and like you should walk away, and not kind of like, for me it felt 100% that's what I should do, but just keep walking, and because your kids are worth it, and you're worth it.
Yeah, perfect. And I just want to add, gentlemen, if you found some value in what you heard today and what we shared, please share this episode far and wide on social media. Send it to another dad that might be going through this challenging time. Leave us a star rating. Give us a comment. The comments really, really help. It shows other dads that are in the beginning of this, or contemplating, or in the thick of it, that this is somewhere to come and listen to and get some help and find some resources. So again, Alex, it was such a pleasure speaking. Everybody, go check things out, buy the book if you're going through it. Even if you're post on that, get it, because it's gonna the relational dynamic doesn't stop, as those of us that are in it know. So it'll help get you educated on that. Alex, thanks so much.
Thank you.
To hear the rest of this episode and access the corresponding resources, visit thedivorcedadvocate.com and become a member of our community. It's free to join and will provide you with the resources you deserve as a divorced or divorcing dad. Thank you for listening. God bless, and I'll talk with you next week.